What's going on, fellas? Jimmy here in Chicago. I hope everybody's safe, having a good week. I got a great story for you tonight. We're going to talk about some mob cops. That's right, some corrupt Chicago cops who are associated with the Chicago outfit. We're also going to talk about a couple cops who aren't affiliated with the outfit, but are definitely corrupt. Now, don't get me wrong, I support the police 100%. But the corruption in our police departments across the country has ran rapid for years, from the top down to the bottom. Boston Police Department, NYPD, Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, Los Angeles, Texas. If you do your research and check the history, major corruption in these police stations. And not only in the big cities, but in a lot of the suburbs and even some of the small hillbilly hick towns, there's corruption. From the sheriff to the captain to the police to some of the detectives down to the beat cops. Now, as we all know, the vast majority of police are good police. First responders all do an amazing job. I mean, where would we be without police, right? That's 95% of them. However, there's about 5%, a few bad apples, that are corrupted by greed, that actually cross the line and end up paying the consequences. But we're going to talk about some of the Chicago police officers that were involved with the Chicago outfit. Now here we got to start with Gus Alex. Here's him, 78 years old, walking into the lobby at the Dirksen Federal Building for his trial. I went to this trial back in the early 1990s. You could tell by the look on his face, he wasn't too happy. This man goes back to the Al Capone days, came up through the ranks of the Chicago outfit and became a top leader right under Tony Ricardo and Paul Ricca. Gus Alex was so trusted by the outfit bosses, he controlled the mob's money in Switzerland. He also was known as the political fixer. He had serious, strong influence with state officials, with the Cook County Sheriff's Department, with all 50 aldermen, senators, congressmen. His good friend was Spiro Agnew. That was Nixon's vice president. Gus Alex also controlled pretty much the entire Chicago Police Department. The CPD was like an extra arm for the outfit. Unfortunately for Gus Alex, though, Lenny Patrick, complete lowlife, testified against Gus Alex, wore a wire against him, and the jury believed him, found that Gus Alex was receiving cash kickbacks from Lenny Patrick's very violent extortion crew. But I bring up Gus Alex because, like I said, he controlled pretty much the entire Chicago Police Department. Here's the infamous building there in 11th and State, the Chicago Police Headquarters. And if only these rooms, these walls could talk, you could just imagine all the corruption that went on in this building. Years ago, we had a saying in Chicago, if you ask me who the biggest gang is, it's not the outfit, not the BGDs, it's not the Latin gangs. The biggest gang in Chicago is the police. Perfect example, you got corrupt Chicago cop Dick Kane. He was good friends with Chicago outfit boss Sam Momo Giancana. He was living a double life, kind of working as a double agent. Fast forward, they found out he was an informant. He happened to be at Rosie's Snack Shop, which is owned by Jimmy Boy Kozo, right there in Grandin, Maine, in the neighborhood, right across the street from the old social club where the boys used to hang out at. Two masked gunmen walked in with shotguns, announced the stick-up, lined everybody up. one of the gunmen walked up to Dick Kane and blew his head off. New York style, ski mask, shotguns, gloves, blasting right there in front of witnesses. And an old YouTuber, old prick that's on YouTube, claims he was there when Dick Kane got blasted on Grand Avenue. Well, believe me, if he was there, he would have got blasted too. But that's Dick Kane, corrupt cop, Chicago outfit associate, living a double life, working as a double agent, and he ends up getting killed right there in the neighborhood. Now here's one of my favorite wise guys. You got Rocky Infelise, World War II veteran. I'll never forget seeing him in shackles in the prison jumpsuit, standing in front of black female federal judge Ann Williams. He was yelling at her, raising his voice, saying he didn't get a fair trial. The government's witnesses, meaning B.J. Jehoda, lied on the stand. He said that he is a World War II paratrooper, and he fought against one of Hitler's toughest regimes. It all fell on deaf ears, where the judge gave Rocky the maximum sentence. But I bring up Rocky Infelise because during the Bobby Salerno trial and going back to his trial, the Good Ship Lollipop trial, him and the Rocky's crew, that low-life piece of shit B.J. Jehoda, who was part of their crew, flipped, cooperated, wore a wire, all the street tax on bookies and burglars and thieves and drug dealers to be doubled. He needed that extra money to pay off all the Cook County sheriffs and all the suburban police departments. But that's what kind of influence Rocky had. He knew who to pay off to get certain things done, mostly so nobody fucks with his gambling operation. But Rocky Infelise had most of the Cook County sheriffs, deputies, suburban chiefs, sergeants, and street cops on his payroll as well. Unfortunately for Rocky, he was convicted, but when you see this man in person, his hands are like sausages. He's got big forearms, a big chest, looked kind of like a retired NFL running back. I mean, a very, very serious dude here. But God bless Rocky Infelise. Low life here, one of the worst men I've ever seen, the devil himself, Jewish gangster Lenny Patrick. He goes back to the Al Capone days. This guy's so sick that the mob tried to blow up his daughter's car right before he testified against Gus Alex. It meant nothing to him. He laughed about it and said he hasn't talked to his daughter in over 23 years. He has no relationship with his daughter. That's what kind of man this guy was. He admitted to 6 to 12 murders. He had 4 to 6 Chicago police officers that were on his beck and call that helped him run his multi-million-dollar gambling operation on the north side. And 2 of the cops that worked for Lenny Patrick actually killed people for him. They actually did work, kind of like what the New York cops did in New York City, the 2 mob cops did. But this was a sick man. He was a prime suspect in President Kennedy's assassination, good friends with Jack Ruby, robbed over 100 banks, committed perjury on the stand, showed no remorse at all, admitted he was scared to die in jail. Judge gives him a very lean sentence of 4 years for a man with a rap sheet like that, just to testify against Gus Alex. But a low-life dice like this, a high-ranking lieutenant on the north side, gambling lieutenant, this guy had several Chicago police officers on his payroll. Here's corrupt chief of police of Willow Springs, Michael Corbett. Sam Giancana appointed him that position because Sam Giancana, Tony Accardo, Joy Upa were all real good friends with the old mayor of Willow Springs, the old corrupt bastard Doc. And Sam Giancana told Corbett, don't ever forget who your friends are. The Corbett claims that all the mob guys loved him, High Limer, Sal Bastone, Marco D'Amico. But what he didn't know is Joey Lombardo despised him and never liked him, trusted him. Joey actually put a hit on him. He gave it to Scalise from the Wild Bunch crew. And right before they were going to hit Michael Corbett, he got pinched. He was involved in the Diane Masters murder. And if you remember, that was, you had mobbed up, corrupt lawyer Alan Masters was adamant about killing his wife. He asked Michael Corbett to do it. Michael Corbett wouldn't do it, but he asked his good friend James Keating, who was a Cook County sheriff at the time. So James Keating, a Cook County sheriff, and Alan Masters waited for Diane Masters to come home, and they brutally beat her with like a pipe or tire irons. I forget. I mean, brutally beat this poor woman. And Michael Corbett, chief of police, testified that he picked up the car with Helen Masters' dead body in the trunk. He picked it up at that bar right across the street on Archer Avenue, Resurrection Cemetery. I think it's called Chet's Lounge, right over there. And he drove that car with a flat tire in the pouring rain from Justice to Willow Springs, which is not a far drive. It's only like maybe a mile. But with a flat tire, it's pouring rain, you're the chief of police, and you got a very dead body in the trunk. He testified when he dumped the car into the canal that night that it took forever for that car to sink. It slowly sank. Eventually, he got pinched. He got caught. Alan Master got convicted for killing his wife. James Keating, Cook County Sheriff, got convicted for killing Alan Masters' wife. He got convicted for dumping the body. He eventually flipped, cooperated, and snitched on several Chicago outfit wise guys. But here's your typical corrupt suburban cop. I actually knew this lowlife. He would pull over my friends and I and take our weed, pour our beer outside on the street. They would bust up our kegger parties that we had, and sometimes he would try to fuck some of our girlfriends. He eventually got shelved from Willow Springs. He went to work for the Summit Police under Sam Boskovich's leadership. Eventually got pinched, went to jail, did some time, and wrote a book. But a real piece of shit here. Loved his job as a corrupt chief. And if some of you say, well, Jimmy, where the hell is Summit? Where's Willow Springs? Well, you go to the end of the world and you take a left. Now, I can't tell you how many Cook County sheriffs are corrupt, from the fat, lazy idiots at the court building to the lowlifes in jail to the ones that think they've got rank that drive around. Very low-paying job. These guys are very easy to corrupt. Not so much now, but back in the day, I'd say probably 40% of the Cook County sheriffs, if not more, were on the mob's payroll. Now here we got a good guy, Chief of Police Matt Rodriguez, getting sworn in by the judge. He was very close with Joey Lombardo, John and Pete DeFranzo, Joe Andriacchi, Joey Iupa. He was also good friends with Mayor Daley and Frank Melito. But here's the chief of police, who's has a lot of close friends who are Chicago outfit heavyweights, and he's also best friends with Mayor. Very powerful man. Here we got probably one of the baddest motherfuckers to ever wear the Chicago police badge. You got Bill Hanhardt. This guy was like a super cop. He was involved in all kinds of shootouts and high-speed chases and caught all these guys. But he was also a member of the Chicago outfit. So the mob guy had their guy in there as chief of police. Mayor Jane Byrne appointed him as the chief, and that pretty much let the outfit have their way. He was also running a multi-million-dollar sophisticated burglary crew in the suburbs and out the Midwest. Guys like Fred Pascente, Mikey Switek, Paulie the Indian Shero used to be part of the burglary crew. But here's him, Bill Hanhardt, walking out of the Dirksen Federal Building. He's obviously out on bail, flashing the peace sign, and one of the most corrupt cops in the history of the Chicago Police Department. And I'm not sure if he's a made member of Chicago outfit, but definitely an associate. Now here's another corrupt cop, Bob Cooley. He went on to pass the bar, became a defense attorney, and started representing a lot of the mob guys and their associates. Also got involved with heavyweights in the First Ward, men like Pat Marcy and Alderman Fred Rohde. He claims he walked in the FBI office one day unannounced, no appointment, and he asked the FBI agents that he needs their help bringing down the Chicago outfit. And that's exactly what this son of a bitch did. He wore a wire on some of the Wild Bunch guys, real dangerous guys like Tony Borsellino, Harry Ellman, Butch Petroselli, Scalise. If they would have caught him, you could just imagine what would have happened to Bob Cooley. He also wore a wire on Pat Marcy, John DiArco, and Alderman Fred Rohde. These are the men that pretty much ran the entire city. He bribed judges. He was the bag man. But what he doesn't tell people in his book, in his interviews, is he was an alcoholic. He had a major cocaine problem, degenerate gambler. He owed Marco D'Amico and John Nonos DeFranzo over $400,000. He was behind on his taxes. I think those are the reasons he decided to flip and cooperate. But here's a Chicago cop, became a Chicago corrupt lawyer, because a lot of mob guys hang out with lowlifes like this because they use him. Because a corrupt lawyer who's got connections with corrupt judges can get their friends and family out of trouble. I seen him testify against Harry Ellman. He bribed Judge Frank Wilson $10,000 to find Harry Ellman not guilty of killing Bill Logan, a union official. He put so much pressure on the judge committed suicide. He also testified against Alderman Fred Rohde. He admitted that he was high on cocaine when he was interviewed by some of the FBI agents. I didn't find this guy credible, but this is just one of several mobbed up Chicago cops. Talk about mobbed up cops. Here's retired Officer DeFante. Him and Mario Ranone, dressed as police officers, allegedly killed BP Amoco executive Herian. They got paid $6,000 each. But here's a cop, probably with maybe an 8th grade education, no background, no credit check. Obviously a mole, a plant by the outfit, one of many. But here's a Chicago mobster, a Chicago mob cop that actually did murder. You know, most Chicago mobbed up cops are just looking over, maybe gambling or prostitution vices. They're doing favors, writing down plates, etc. But some of them actually do some heavy work, like the guys that killed for Lenny Patrick, or this guy here. He's one of the trigger men that killed BP Amoco executive, similar to the mob cops in New York. Now here is the corrupt town of Stone Park. You got Robert Natelli, the mayor, Tom Tucker, Stone Park lieutenant. These guys got busted for running a couple $100,000 gambling operation, and Lord knows what else. As we all know, Stone Park is right next to Melrose Park, very corrupt town, and up and down Manheim Road, you've got seedy hotels, drug spots, gambling joints, prostitution rings, a lot of shady characters. It's kind of like a little Sin City. But here's the mayor, the police chief, and lieutenant, all Chicago outfit associates affiliated with the Elmwood Park and the Melrose Park crew. But these guys did a couple years in jail, I think 4 years, never ratted, never rolled. Here's another corrupt Chicago cop and a mob cop. You got Fred Pascente. He was good friends with Chucky Nicoletti, good friends with Tony Spilotro, Paulie Shiro, Kozo, Joey Lombardo. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Quite the character. He was also part of the burglary crew ran by Chief of Police Bill Hanhardt. You're looking at a master thief, a master burglar. but yet he was a Chicago police officer with mob connections. He wrote a book and has some pretty funny stories to tell. I've never met Freddie, but I heard a lot of interesting things about him. Now, here we go. Let's go to February 19th, 1999, right? You got a Cook County Sheriff, Michael Ricci. His title is Director of Home Monitoring. What kind of position, what kind of title is that? And then eager to go, all ready to go with the sunglasses, you got Chicago police officer Anthony Twan Doyle, who's assigned to the Chicago Police Department's evidence room. Now, what a lot of you don't know is the evidence room is in the basement of the Cook County Court Building. And the Cook County Court Building is right next, adjacent to the jail. And for years, evidence, guns, drugs, etc., would somehow disappear from the evidence room right before the trial were to start. And it would go unaccounted for. No evidence. A lot of times they had to throw the trials out. But that's what kind of shenanigans went on in the Cook County Court Building and Chicago Police Department. But here's Twan and Michael Ricci, two Chicago cops going to visit Frank Calabrese Sr. in Milan, Michigan. These guys were two of the defendants at the Family Secrets trial. Unfortunately, Michael Ricci didn't make it to trial. Twan blew trial and was found guilty. Now here's corrupt cop Anthony Twan Doyle, associate of the 26th Street crew. He was good friends with Frank Calabrese, Caruso, Ronnie Jarrett, and several others. At this point in the time when he got pinched, he was kind of like a sleeper for the outfit, retired, living the life out in Arizona. Twan got caught signing on to the police computer into the evidence room. It showed what time he signed on. It showed how long he was on the computer for. And it showed the piece of evidence he was looking for. There was only one piece of evidence he was looking for, and that was the bloody glove that Nick Calabrese left behind when he killed his best friend, John Theckerata. That glove sat in evidence for years. And then years later, when they opened up the Family Secrets investigation, they took DNA from that glove. They went around, the G went around and swabbed every Chicago outfit guy and associate in every federal prison. They swabbed everybody. And the DNA matched one guy, and that was Nick Calabrese. When they presented that to Nick, at first he wasn't going to flip. He said he had nothing to say. When he sat on it overnight, they threatened him with an electric chair the next day because it was his DNA that matched. Nick Calabrese decided to cooperate and testify. But Twan was caught on tape trying to remove that key piece of evidence. Without that glove, there probably would never have been an investigation. But he had the best lawyers during all the attorneys at the Family Secret trial. He had the dream team. He had two young attorneys, Daryl Goldberg, Damian Sharonis, and then the elite lawyer, Ralph Metchik, right? And he didn't listen to his lawyers. After seeing Joey Lombardo fail on the stand, when Joey tried to get up there and bullshit the jury, then Frank Calabrese got up there and lost his temper. Twan thought it would be a good idea for him to get up there and go up against some of the best prosecutors in the country, like Marcus Funk or Mitch Mars. And when they had character witnesses come up, Twan had 3-4 fellow policemen. They came up there basically to say what a great cop, what a great friend, what a great father, what a great buddy he was. And then during redirect, Mitch Mars would say, well, let me ask you this, detective. Have you ever visited a mob boss in prison? The detective would answer, no. No more questions. The next cop, Doyle's friend, would get up there and say what a great guy he was. the prosecutor would say, well, let me ask you this, Sergeant. Have you ever in your career as a policeman for 45 years, have you ever thought of visiting a mob boss in prison? The guy said, no, absolutely not. No more questions. So they were showing why was Twan visiting Frank Calabrese in prison. They were talking in code, right? They actually played the video. So you can see the video and hear the audio. And Frank Calabrese is meeting with Michael Ricci, who's not in the frame here, but in other frames, and Doyle. And they're talking in code. And Frank Calabrese is sending messages through Doyle and Ricci to send to the guys outside. And Frank came up with this elaborate code where they would talk in opposite genders. For example, if they would say it was somebody's birthday, that meant they were going to kill that person. Okay, should I bring a present? Yeah, bring some jewelry, meaning bring some handcuffs. My sister is sick, meaning he's talking about Nick Calabrese is going to cooperate. I think she needs to go see a doctor, meaning we got to do something about her. And then Twan says, yeah, she needs some shock therapy, maybe a prong, and he starts laughing. But he denied knowing what Frank Calabrese was talking about. He said he was just going along with them. But you could clearly see he was very interested in listening very intently to what Frank Calabrese had to say. But it was the prison tapes and Doyle's own testimony that basically is what convicted him. He probably should have did what Nicky Ferriola did, listened to his lawyers, kept his mouth shut, and pled out. Now here we got Michael Ricci, again, Cook County Sheriff, one of the defendants at the Family Secrets trial. He was visiting Frank Calabrese in prison, as we just talked about. He was on tape, talking in code. Unfortunately, he got pinched in 2005. You can see he doesn't look too good. He didn't make it to trial. He died before it started in 2007. But he would have been sitting in the courtroom right next to the rest of the defendants. But this is Michael Ricci, who had a high position in the Cook County Sheriff's Department. Now here's Vito Scavo. He was chief of police of Melrose Park. Joey Aiuppa put him in that position, kind of like Sam Giancana put Michael Corbett as chief of police in Willow Springs. He obviously worked for Joey Aiuppa coming up. We'll call him an associate. The Chicago outfit, a guy you don't hear about too much. But unfortunately, him, Gary Montino, and a couple other high-ranking Melrose Park detectives got pinched for operating their own security company. I think they got charged with some extortion as well. They were going to local businesses in Melrose Park, up and down on 25th. There's a lot of industrial parks there, a lot of industrial manufacturing, and they were basically demanding that these companies would use Vito's security firm, that all their security would go through them using extortion tactics. They were doing this all during police time. But the reason this case didn't get a lot of publicity is because Vito's trial was going on at the same time Governor Blago's trial was going on. Governor Blago's trial was on the 25th floor, where the big courtrooms are, jam-packed, a lot of media there. Vito's trial, along with Gary Montino and the other guy, I'm forgetting his name, the other cop, their trial was on the 9th floor. So there was no media there, not much attention. So I was going back and forth to trials, but I did go to Vito's trial. I was rooting for him. Our family is very grateful to Vito Scavo. You see, back in 1997, my beautiful niece, Heather, 19 years old, was killed in Melrose Park. And through the great police work that Vito Scavo, Gary Montino, and the rest of the guys did, they actually captured the little punks that killed my niece. And when they rounded up the last one, he was the youngest one of the group. He was hiding in Joliet. When Vito and his guy arrested him, the little punk, little gangbanger, spit right in his face. But this is a man's man, Vito Scavo. My family is grateful to him, gave us justice. He did his time like a man, never thought about flipping or cooperating. Did a few years in prison, got out. And now he owns a couple of the best Italian restaurants in Chicago. But Vito Scavo, God bless you. Now here we're going to talk about a corrupt Berwyn cop, James Fratano. He was a part of the Mike Sarno crew and one of the defendants. Him, as well as a corrupt Cicero police officer. Not only were they part of a mobbed up burglary crew, but he testified that he would drive down to Florida a couple times a year with a couple $100,000 from drug money and stolen merchandise money to deliver to his father, who was a mobbed up guy. He also testified that on certain house calls he would go on, he would actually case the place. And if he noticed any valuables or cash or guns or drugs, he would tip off Mike Sarno, Mark Pulchman's crew, so the crew could rob it. That's what kind of cops you had working in Berwyn and Cicero. Also, one of the guys testified that when he was at work, this son of a bitch was fucking his wife, actually having an affair with the guy's wife. That's what on police time. He also testified that when he heard the bomb go off, when the crew blew up the video poker company in Berwyn, he said he felt the whole house shake. But this was one mobbed up cop from Berwyn. And like I said, he was actually casing residents of Berwyn, giving the crew tips on houses to rob. And to me, probably one of the worst human beings ever, notorious Commander John Burge. Some people will tell you this scumbag's a hero. I mean, he was in Vietnam. He was an MP in Vietnam. And he actually learned how to torture the Viet Cong. And sometimes people think, well, if a guy is in military or is in combat, he makes good police. Yeah, that's true, but not all the time. But this guy and a couple of cops that worked underneath him were notorious. Anytime a cop or a citizen got killed, they would round up the usual suspects, usually young black boys, 17, 18 years old. They would get them in a room, deprive them of food, deprive them of water, burn them with cigarette butts, beat them with phone books, choke them out with plastic typewriter covers, give them electric shock to their nipples, to their balls, to their ears. Tactics he learned in Vietnam he would use on these black kids, getting these poor kids to testify to murders they did not commit. Over 100. And some of these kids, they couldn't even read or write, right? So they do 20, 30, 40 years in jail. And then with good work by some of these universities, and when they learn more about DNA, they actually realized through DNA research that these inmates were innocent. So after spending 20, 30, 40 years in prison for a crime they did not commit, they were eventually released, and every one of them and their families, they sued the city of Chicago for millions of dollars. Now, this prick here, he was retired, okay, living in Florida on his boat, drinking beer, fishing, smoking his fucking cigars. One day he gets a knock on the door by the FBI, and the FBI agents question him about some of the alleged torture that was going on in the 70s and 80s. He lied to the FBI. They arrested him on that and charged him. It was a bench trial. I went to that trial. Now, the judge would not allow all 50, 75 victims of John Burge to get up there and testify, but she did allow like 5 of them. And none of the witnesses knew each other. They were all older black men who spent 20, 30, 40 years in prison. And they talked about the beatings and torture that John Burge and other police officers, what they did to these poor guys. And believe me, it was freaking powerful. I mean, this is one of the most corrupt cops ever. Obviously, him being a commissioner, he was obviously receiving payments in cash by the Chicago outfit. He eventually was found guilty, showed absolutely no remorse. He had nobody in there in court to support him besides his brother, but he looked just like this in court, fat, out of shape, red face, your typical corrupt, donut-eating Chicago cop. But this is Commander John Burge, and one thing that really pissed me off was a couple of the black guys said they smelled alcohol on the cop's breath. So not only were these cops torturing and beating these young black kids, but they were drunk while they were doing it. But here's one of the most corrupt cops, Commanders John Burge, Chicago. Now here's this pig here. I mean, look at him. Doesn't he look like a pig? You got probably tagged the most corrupt Chicago cop. You got Joe Mazadowski. This guy was a police officer for 22 years. He started robbing certain gangs, selling to other gangs. Basically, had a couple $100,000 cocaine business going on the side. Him and several police officers eventually got caught. They had so many charges against this lowlife, the judge gave him life in prison. Imagine getting pulled over, especially if you're a black or brown involved. Imagine getting pulled over if you're black or brown by a guy like this. Obviously, some low like this would be easy for the Chicago outfit guys to bribe or corrupt. And then here's one of his partners. I'd rather not say his name. We'll just call him Mr. Hernandez. This guy acted as a bouncer, a driver for certain outfit guys. He acted as a lookout on certain meetings. He overlooked a couple mobbed up high-stake poker games. Basically, a cop but a criminal. He also provided security and would steal drugs and guns from the evidence room from the Chicago Police Department and resell it on the streets. He would rob stash houses from certain gang leaders. He eventually got pinched for running a drug operation while he was working as a Chicago cop. And here I pull up this map here. I'm not sure if you can see it, but all those red pins are the suburbs of Chicago. And in every one, there's corruption from the mayor's department down to the police station. So going on the south side, obviously you got Dalton, Chicago Heights, Crestwood, Alsip, Blue Island, Tinley Park, Joliet, Oak Lawn, all very corrupt towns. Summit, Bridgeview, Oak Park, Elmwood Park, Cicero, Melrose Park, Addison, Maywood, all corrupt towns. I mean, the list goes on and on. I did a show on many corrupt suburbs of Chicago where I talk about mayors that got indicted, police officers, police chiefs that all got caught doing some sort of illegal activity. And then again, we got this lowlife here, corrupt cop, Ronnie Watts. He really wasn't involved in the Chicago outfit, but again, a very easy guy to bribe, especially back then. These guys were only making, maybe $500-600 a week. So it was very easily for an outfit guy or a gangster to offer him a couple thousand a week. Obviously they would take the money. But Ronnie Watts here, he actually was a cop who crossed that line. He became a gangster himself. He had a crew of rogue officers that started robbing drug dealers, pitting drug dealers one against the other, plant evidence on people, accepting bribes, basically running a criminal enterprise. Just one of hundreds of corrupt Chicago police officers. Hopefully they'll get a handle on things and clean up some of the corruption. And then obviously, you got probably 10, 15 retired off-duty Chicago officers that I personally know that are a little mobbed up. I definitely would never throw their names out there. But they're good guys, but, at the same time, you got to be careful. Now I want to share with you really quick. Let me know what you guys think of it.
Investigative reporter Chuck Gowdy was first on the scene in 1987 and has been looking into a case the authorities have never been able to solve. And he joins us now with what the I-Team has found. Chuck.
Cheryl, Chicago's forgotten hit happened 35 years ago tonight when Charles Chuck Merriam opened his front door for the last time. The hotshot Amoco executive was wearing pajama bottoms when authorities say he was greeted by a pair of men who have been described to the I-Team as wearing Chicago police uniforms, and they promptly killed him. His son tonight says police told him years ago that the hitmen were each paid $6,000 to murder his dad. I'm moving. When Chuck Merriam's body was wheeled away on this day, November 4th, 1987, he was just 52 years old. A few days earlier, Merriam had asked his Amoco bosses for personal security protection, according to his family, feeling threatened by one of Chicago's most successful gas dealers, Frank Melito, who held lucrative city contracts to service Chicago police vehicles. Merriam was implementing a controversial business model change, Midwest Amoco stations being pushed from full-service gas and repair stations to self-serve mini-marts. He thought that the company needed to provide him some level of protection. When he went to visit with these people, is that what it was?
Yes.
So
yeah.
Against physical harm.
Against physical
maybe.
harm. There was only one person that ever came up, and it was Frank Melito.
Melito was tight with Chicago police officials and had connections to top Chicago outfit figures, according to federal prosecutors who had enlisted Amoco and Merriam to help put Melito in prison in 1986 in a tax and mail fraud case. It was against that crime and business backdrop 35 years ago that Chuck Merriam was murdered in a professional gangland-style hit.
Suburban and county investigators tonight are examining some evidence they found here in Merriam's townhouse.
ABC 7 on the scene that day, but the case and public interest would soon go cold. Merriam's son was 25 at the time. Tonight at age 60, Ken Merriam alleges that what actually happened to his father has been covered up for decades.
Because two Chicago policemen actually, they were in Chicago police officer uniforms, actually made the shots. They weren't going to try to solve the case because it'd just be embarrassing for the police department. So I actually felt that at that point it would never be solved.
And it hasn't been. Although still an open case where new information might be helpful, officials of the FBI, local police, and Amoco would not agree to be interviewed. Frank Melito was among several mob-linked individuals questioned about the Merriam murder, according to FBI records, but was not very cooperative and refused to take polygraph lie detector tests. Not long after the hit, Merriam's son says officers told him they had an idea who was responsible, but not to expect charges.
They basically said that this crime will never be solved.
These 1990 FBI records obtained by the I-Team list several subjects and suspects in the Merriam murder case, including Melito and also convicted career outfit member Mario Ranone, and this man, Renato Ray DiSilvestro, a retired Chicago policeman.
It's Chuck Gowdy from ABC in Chicago.
The I-Team traced former Chicago police officer DiSilvestro to his home here in Las Vegas, where he moved after leaving the department in 1993 following CPD misconduct cases and allegations by the state's attorney that he was connected to organized crime. Other than a month-long suspension from CPD for bringing discredit to the department, most charges were either not pursued or dropped. Despite the FBI listing DiSilvestro as a possible suspect in the past, he vigorously denies a role in Merriam's murder.
I could not be in uniform like he's saying.
Well, you could have worn a uniform.
Nope. Nope.
Guilty as sin.
You didn't do it.
Do what? Kill the guy? No, sir.
DiSilvestro has previously fended off questions about crimes, telling the Tribune in 2000, "You asking me to talk about a murder? You got to be soft, pal. I'm from the old school. I'm not a rat." This CPD pensioner now tells the I-Team he was contacted several times years ago by FBI agents.
They wanted to start talking about the mafia. I said, listen, I ain't got nothing to say. See, if you want to arrest me, but leave me the alone. Because as you know, I'm carrying a piece in it. It's a long time.
Yeah.
What do you think of that lowlife, right? There's a mobbed up Chicago corrupt police officer, retired, right? Who did work meaning killed for money, collecting a pension. I wonder how many of them are out there. But that's it. That's my show for today, man. If you guys like my Chicago mob trial stories, please hit the like button, subscribe, share with your friends. Be safe out there. Hope everybody has a great week. Ciao.